When Japan lost the war in 1945, the country was left in ruins. Factories were silent. Families had nothing. The economy was shattered so deeply that even hope felt like a luxury. In the middle of this devastation, Japanese workers faced a harsh truth. They couldn't rebuild the nation with grandeur, only with whatever small strength they still had. So every day they showed up, exhausted and uncertain, doing whatever little they could. A cleaner swept the floor a little better. A mechanic tightened a bolt with a bit more care. A manager adjusted one process, one tiny step at a time. It wasn't a revolution. It didn't feel heroic. It was just survival, through small, humble improvements. Then one day, American experts arrived. Engineers and statisticians sent by the US government to help Japan recover. They taught new methods for quality control, efficiency, and production. But here's what's interesting. Japan didn't copy these ideas. They absorbed them, blended them with their own cultural values, the discipline of the samurai, the precision of craftsmen, the patience of Zen. Something new began to take shape. At Toyota's small factory, workers were encouraged not to be silent followers, but active problem solvers. If they saw something that could be improved, even the smallest thing, they spoke up. They experimented, they refined, they made tiny adjustments every single day. No giant leaps, no dramatic overhauls. Just small steps, over and over until those steps became a march, and that march became a movement, and that movement transformed the entire Japanese economy. Within a few decades, the world was stunned. Japan, a nation once reduced to rubble, had become a symbol of efficiency, quality, and discipline. And when people asked how this miracle happened, the Japanese finally revealed the quiet secret behind their rise. A simple word that carried the weight of an entire philosophy. When people first hear the word Kaizen, they often assume it's just another productivity hack, a catchy Japanese term slapped onto self-help books and corporate workshops. But the real essence of Kaizen is far deeper, more human, and more ancient than most people realize. It begins with a simple but uncomfortable truth. Change is hard because our brains are built to resist anything that feels too big, too sudden, or too uncertain. Every time we try to completely reinvent ourselves overnight, through intense dieting, extreme discipline, or unrealistic goals, we're fighting biology. The mind panics, shuts down, and pulls us back to old habits. Most people fail not because they are weak, but because they try to transform their entire life in one dramatic leap. Kaizen offers a different path. Instead of fighting human nature, it works with it. It says, if you cannot take massive steps, take smaller ones. If you cannot climb the entire mountain today, just walk a few inches. The idea is almost insultingly simple. Commit to tiny, incremental improvements. But beneath this simplicity lies an extraordinary psychological insight. Small improvements slip past the brain's defenses. They don't activate fear, stress, or burnout. They feel manageable, even trivial, at first. Read one page instead of 50. Do one push-up instead of a full workout. Clean your desk for 2 minutes instead of organizing your whole room. It seems almost useless until you realize that these micro-actions accumulate, compound, and eventually reshape your identity. The power isn't in the size of the effort, it's in the repetition. Over time, something incredible happens. What begins as a tiny step becomes a routine. The routine becomes a habit. The habit becomes a skill, and the skill becomes a transformation. Kaizen is built on the belief that lasting change grows slowly, like a tree, not explosively like a firework. It's the philosophy of redirecting your life by just 1 degree each day. If you change your course by 1 degree, it looks meaningless at first, but over months, over years, that 1 degree shift places you in an entirely different world. This is why Kaizen rebuilt entire companies and eventually influenced personal development, because it recognized that improvement is not a dramatic event, but an ongoing process. Kaizen also teaches something that most people misunderstand about happiness and progress. You don't need to overexert yourself to grow. In fact, when improvement is too painful, the brain rejects it. But when change is gentle, accessible, and almost too easy to refuse, you start moving automatically. Instead of relying on bursts of motivation, Kaizen builds momentum. Instead of overwhelming you, it builds confidence. You start to trust yourself again. You start to feel capable. And that feeling, the feeling of "I can do this," is the foundation of real transformation. But Kaizen isn't just about doing small actions. It's also about observing yourself, paying attention, noticing friction, adjusting, learning. Each day becomes an experiment. Each failure becomes information. Each success becomes a quiet reinforcement that you are moving forward, even if the progress is slow. The goal is not perfection. The goal is to become slightly better than yesterday, and slightly better than that tomorrow, over and over, without stopping. And eventually, you reach a point where you realize something profound. The real magic of Kaizen is not just the improvement itself, it's who you become because of the improvement. You become someone who doesn't quit, someone who doesn't break when motivation fades, someone who grows not through intensity, but through consistency. You become a person shaped by small wins, small efforts, small commitments, all compounding quietly behind the scenes. That is what Kaizen truly is. Not a technique, not a trend, but a philosophy of gentle, persistent progress. A mindset that says your life doesn't need to change in one defining moment. It only needs to change slightly. Today, tomorrow, and the day after that. And if you keep doing that long enough, you won't just upgrade your habits, you'll upgrade your entire identity, one small improvement at a time. If Kaizen is the philosophy of small daily improvements, then the question becomes, how do you actually live it? Not in theory, not as motivation, but as a genuine lifestyle. Because Kaizen is not something you do once. It's something you integrate into the way you approach every part of your life. The first step is to lower the bar. Most people set goals that are too big, too ambitious, and too far from who they currently are. They think a habit is only worth it if it's impressive. But Kaizen flips that mindset on its head. Instead of asking, what is the best version of this habit? Ask, what is the easiest possible version I can do today without resistance? If reading a book feels hard, read one page. If exercising feels impossible, do 5 squats. If journaling feels overwhelming, write 1 sentence. Your goal is not results. Your goal is continuity. Once the loop of consistency is created, the improvements will naturally grow. The second step is to remove friction. Most bad habits are easy because they're convenient. Most good habits are avoided because they demand too much effort at the start. Kaizen teaches you to rearrange your environment so the small improvement becomes the path of least resistance. Put the book beside your bed. Place your water bottle on your desk. Put your phone in another room when you need focus. When the environment supports your intentions, willpower becomes irrelevant. Next, Kaizen asks you to observe and reflect. Improvement isn't a straight line. You're supposed to adjust as you go. Every day, ask, what stopped me? What helped me? What can be improved by 1% tomorrow? Most people repeat the same mistakes because they never study themselves. Kaizen encourages micro-corrections. If the habit is too hard, shrink it. If it's too easy, deepen it. If it's inconsistent, simplify it. Progress becomes a daily negotiation, not a battle. Then comes the most important part. Reinforce identity, not performance. Every time you complete a tiny habit, you are proving something to yourself. I am someone who improves. This identity shift is the real engine behind Kaizen. It doesn't matter if the action was small. What matters is that you showed up. The moment you internalize the identity of someone who grows consistently, your life trajectory changes. You stop chasing motivation and start trusting your process. Finally, Kaizen teaches you to stay in motion. Not in a rush, not in a sprint, but in a gentle, unbroken rhythm. Growth becomes like breathing. Small, natural, and continuous. This removes the pressure of perfection. It removes the guilt of occasional failure. Every day becomes an opportunity to take another tiny step, knowing that these steps will eventually carry you somewhere remarkable. If you apply Kaizen seriously, you'll notice something subtle but powerful. Improvement stops feeling heavy. You don't force it anymore. You don't obsess over results. You simply engage in a lifestyle where you are slightly better today than yesterday, and slightly better tomorrow than today. And in the long run, that's what changes everything. Not intensity, not drama, just gentle, steady progress that never stops. In a world obsessed with instant results, dramatic transformations, and overnight success, Kaizen feels almost too soft, too quiet, too humble to matter. But maybe that's the point. Real growth doesn't always look like a breakthrough. Often, it looks like a small decision, the kind no one else notices, repeated until it becomes part of who you are. Because the truth is, we don't build our lives through rare moments of inspiration. We build them through the choices we make on ordinary days, the tiny choices, the ones we underestimate, the ones we ignore, the ones we're convinced won't matter, but they do. They always do. The philosophy you learn today isn't asking you to become extraordinary overnight. It's asking you to take responsibility for one small piece of your life, just one, and then another, until the person you've quietly been shaping becomes someone you're proud of. Not because they changed everything at once, but because they kept moving, even when the steps were small. This is the heart of Kaizen, the understanding that you don't need to be perfect to begin, and you don't need to transform instantly to change your direction. What matters is the trajectory, the momentum, the quiet refusal to stay the same. If you keep improving by just 1% each day, the change is invisible at first. You won't feel different tomorrow or the day after. But weeks will pass, months will pass, a year will pass, and then suddenly, you'll look back and realize that the person you used to be feels impossibly far away, separated from you by thousands of tiny steps you once thought were too small to matter. But they mattered. They were everything. In the end, Kaizen teaches one profound truth. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You rise to the level of your habits, the small things you choose to do repeatedly, even when no one is watching. And so, the real question is not, how do I change my life? The real question is, what is one small thing I can do today that moves me forward? Because your future isn't built in grand moments. It's built in the quiet decisions you make right now. And if you can commit to that, even gently, even imperfectly, then your life will begin to shift, slowly, subtly, steadily, until the climb itself becomes meaningful. That is the power of Kaizen, not in its intensity, but in its consistency, not in its noise, but in its quiet, unstoppable momentum. And the moment you take your first small step, the transformation has already begun.